My name is Arthur. I'm 98 years old and I still wake up every day at 6 in the morning without an alarm clock. The sun comes through my bedroom window in a way that feels like it knows me, like it knows exactly where I'm lying. And I stay there for a few minutes, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence of the house, a silence that doesn't scare me anymore, a silence that, over time, I've learned to accept as company. I've lived in Chicago for as long as I can remember. But it was back in 1981 that Eleanor and I bought this house, here in the Lincoln Park neighborhood, with an amount of money that seemed absurd at the time for two people who had gotten that far on their own steam. 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a huge backyard that got covered in crabgrass in the summer and in the winter smelled like damp earth in a way I could never quite describe, but that always felt like the smell of home. Eleanor loved that backyard. She used to say that a house without a yard was only half a house. And she was right about almost everything she said. She was a woman of firm convictions, an easy laugh, and hands that seemed to know how to do anything. We raised 3 kids in this house. Lucas, the oldest, who even as a little boy had this serious way about him, always calculating everything, weighing each word before he spoke. Sophia, the youngest, who would cry at commercials for butter and could spend 2 hours consoling a neighbor she barely knew. And Daniel, the middle child, who always lived between his siblings' 2 extremes, trying to please everyone and, deep down, not managing to please even himself. 4 years ago, Eleanor passed away. It was in the middle of the night in her sleep in a way the doctor called sudden and peaceful. She didn't suffer. At least that's what I tell myself when the longing gets to be too much. I was right beside her, as I had been for 47 years of marriage, and I woke up to a different kind of silence. A silence that was no longer company. It was absence. I won't lie to you. Those first few months were the hardest of my life. The house, which had always been full of movement, of voices, of history, seemed to have shrunk. Every room had a memory of Eleanor stuck to the walls. The crack in the kitchen floor, where Lucas dropped a jar of pickles when he was 8 and waited for a scolding that never came, because Eleanor found it so funny she couldn't get mad. The pencil marks in the hallway, in her handwriting, tracking the kids' height year after year, the blue paint stain on the living room windowsill, a reminder of an afternoon when we tried to paint the house together and ended up in a playful fight with the brushes. These marks are my inheritance. They're what's left besides the documents and the photos, and I swear I wouldn't trade a single one of them for anything in this world. It was about 6 months ago that everything started to change. It was a Sunday, dinner was on the table, and all 3 kids had come to visit at the same time, which was unusual enough to make me a little suspicious. I'm old, but I'm not a fool. I could tell something was in the air before anyone even opened their mouth. It was Lucas who started. He has this way of talking that sounds like a prepared speech, as if he'd rehearsed it in front of a mirror. He said the family was worried about me, that I was at an advanced age, that living alone was a risk, that there were wonderful places where I could have all the assistance I needed, with doctors, activities, quality meals. Sophia jumped in right after, her eyes already welling up, saying she loved me and couldn't sleep at night thinking about me here all alone. I let them talk. I took a sip of my coffee, looked at the chair where Eleanor always sat, and waited. When they finished, I said with all the calm I still have, I'm not going anywhere. I have my neighbors, I have my friends, I have my routines. I know every sound this house makes. I know when the kitchen pipe makes that groaning noise before it rains. I know the 3rd step on the staircase creaks at night. I know where everything is in the dark. This house knows me, and I know it. It's not a place. It's who I am. Lucas tried to continue, but I raised my hand firmly. The conversation was over for me. The rest of dinner was spent in an uncomfortable silence, and they left earlier than usual. In the following days, Daniel started calling. Every morning, sometimes more than once a day. He mailed me brochures for assisted living facilities with pictures of beautiful gardens and staged smiles on glossy covers. I flipped through them all carefully, out of respect for the intention, and put them in the recycling pile. But it was on a Saturday afternoon that something inside me shifted for good. I was resting on the living room couch with the TV on low when I heard Lucas and Daniel talking in the hallway. They didn't know I was awake, or maybe they didn't care. I heard my name, I heard the street name, I heard the number that made me freeze, $1.2 million. That was the value of the house, according to a recent appraisal. And I heard Daniel say in a voice I'd never heard from him before, A cold, calculated voice. "If he can't take care of it anymore, it could take us months to sort it out in court. We need to think about this now." I lay there, not moving a muscle, listening to every word. When they came into the living room and saw my eyes were open, there was a silence that was worth more than any explanation. Lucas looked away. Daniel pretended to look at his phone. And I just said I was tired and that they could go home. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in the bed I had shared with Eleanor for 4 decades, looking at the ceiling she had also looked at, and I wondered how I had gotten to this point. Whether my children, whom I had raised with so much love within these walls, now saw me as a problem to be solved or as a father who needed to be protected. And I wondered if the difference between the two was just a matter of perspective, or if there was something darker behind those hallway conversations. It was that night that I made a decision. I wasn't going to wait for someone else to decide for me. I never had. I wasn't about to start now. The next morning I picked up the phone and called the lawyer my friend Harry from the chess club had once recommended, a guy named Mark Stevens, who understood estate planning and how to protect what's yours when other people start to think they have more of a right to your own life than you do. I didn't know yet what Mark would tell me. I didn't know what was coming. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. This house was mine, and I was still standing. If you're enjoying this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and let us know what city you're watching from. We'll be right back. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear. Mark Stevens's office was on a quiet street in the Old Town neighborhood, the kind with big trees on the sidewalks and a silence that contrasted with the rest of Chicago. I walked in wearing my gray wool coat, the same one I've worn for as long as I can remember, and sat in the chair across from his desk with the posture of someone who hadn't come to ask for a favor, but to settle a matter. Mark was a man in his 50s with thin glasses and a way of listening that made me feel like he was actually paying attention, not just waiting for me to finish so he could talk. I told him everything. The dinner conversation, the brochures in the mail, Daniel's daily calls, and most importantly, what I had overheard in that hallway on Saturday afternoon. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he asked only one question. "Are you perfectly clear on what you want?" I said I was. "I want to stay in my house until the end of my days. I want it to be preserved as it is, and I don't want anyone making a decision about it without my permission, as long as I have the health and soundness of mind to give that permission." Mark nodded and began to explain calmly and precisely what my rights were. As long as I was mentally competent, no one, not a child, not a judge, not any institution, could remove me from my home or sell my assets without my consent. But he was honest with me. It was important to get the paperwork in order ahead of time, so that in any future circumstance, my wishes would be clear and legally protected. I left his office with a to-do list and a feeling I hadn't expected. Relief. Not the relief of someone who had solved a problem, but the relief of someone who was once again the author of his own story. In less than a month, the will was updated. A revocable trust was established, with clauses ensuring the house would remain under my control as long as I lived and could only be sold or transferred after my death, according to the conditions I myself had set. A carefully drafted power of attorney defined who could make decisions on my behalf and under what specific circumstances. All 3 children received copies of everything by certified mail, with no advance warning. I can only imagine what they must have felt opening those envelopes. The following Sunday arrived with a lead-gray sky over Chicago, the way the city gets in the fall, as if the weather itself wanted to be serious. I asked the 3 of them to come for dinner. I made Eleanor's chicken and rice, that recipe she knew by heart, and that I had slowly learned over the years, until I could get close to the flavor she made. It's never the same, but it's good enough to remind me of her. They arrived with that awkward silence of people who have received news but don't yet know how to react. Sophia hugged me at the door, tightly, and held on a second longer than usual. Lucas greeted me with a nod. Daniel barely looked at me when he came in. We sat at the table. I served dinner. I let the silence fill the space for a few minutes as spoons clinked against plates and the wind outside gently rattled the kitchen window. Then I put my spoon down, looked at each of them with the calm of someone who has spent a lifetime learning to choose the right words, and spoke. "I know you're worried about me. I know it's hard to see your father getting old in a big house all alone without you being able to control what happens here. But I need you to understand something. This house isn't a problem to be solved. This house is my life. It's where I raised the three of you. It's where your mother left the print of her own hand on the hallway wall. It's where I can still hear the sound of your feet running through the yard, even though it's been decades since that sound went away. Sophia started to cry. Quietly, without drama, just tears streaming down her face. I continued. The will is updated. The trust is in effect. The power of attorney is signed. I've taken all the necessary steps to ensure my wishes are respected now and in the future. But I didn't do this to defend myself from you. I did it so I can look at you without suspicion. So we can continue to be a family, without the value of this house standing between us like a shadow. Lucas looked up. It was the first time that night he had truly looked at me. There was something in his face I couldn't name at that moment. Shame, maybe. Or relief. Or both at once. Which sometimes look a lot alike. He said, "Dad, I was wrong. We were wrong. We got so worried about what might happen that we forgot to ask what you wanted." Daniel was silent for a long time. Then he said, in a voice I'd never heard from him, a small voice, almost like a boy's, "I remember when we used to play out in the yard and Mom would yell from the hallway that dinner was ready. We'd pretend not to hear just so we could stay out a little longer. I think it's been a long time since I thought of this house as the house where I grew up. I was thinking of it as something else, and I'm ashamed of that." It was the most honest thing Daniel had said in years, and I knew in that moment that the dinner had been worth more than any legal document. But the story didn't end there. Because that night after the kids had gone, I went to our bedroom to tidy the drawer in Eleanor's dresser, which I had left untouched since she passed. And at the bottom of the drawer, under an embroidered handkerchief and a photo of us on our 20th wedding anniversary, I found a small envelope, yellowed with age, with my name written in her handwriting. I sat on the edge of the bed with the envelope in my hands for a long time before opening it. The letter was short. She wrote that she knew one day I would be alone in this house and that she was afraid I would feel lost without her. She wrote that this house was always the place where our love had an address, and that if I was reading this letter, it was because I was still standing, still breathing, still looking out the window that had always been ours. And that, for her, was enough. That I didn't need anything else. That she was already in every wall, in every crack in the floor, in every mark in the hallway. And that she always would be. I folded the letter carefully, put it back in the envelope, and held it against my chest for a moment. Then I got up. I went to the living room window that looks out onto the yard. The sky had cleared after the rain, and there was a big moon over Chicago. One of those moons that seemed too close to be real. I looked at that yard that has seen so much, and I thought of Eleanor, of the kids, of the grandkids who are already grown, of the stories these walls hold without asking for anything in return. And I understood, with the clarity that only comes with 98 years of a life lived, that a house is made of walls and beams, but a home is built with love, with choices, and with the courage to stay when the easiest thing would be to leave. And I stayed. I'm here, and I plan on staying.